So when we talk about trade, I believe we have a pretty good understanding of what it's all about. And you have a market here. Actually, I'm going to turn it the other way so I'll have more room. So you have a market here. This is the US. I think I did this before, but we'll just run through this again. So you have a market for a particular product. And of course, you have price, you have quantity here, you have demand, you have supply. And we all kind of understand what this is all about. You have your equilibrium here, equilibrium for quantity, equilibrium for price. So that is quantity for equilibrium, quantity for price. So that red dot is representing a perfect market. But we know that in any market, it's not static, it's always moving. And you have these situations where a product may, the demand and supply of that product may shift. And sometimes it has to do with the life cycle of the product. If the product is at the end of its life cycle, then of course there's less demand for it, which means that over a period of time, the equilibrium shifts. So you have a lower equilibrium for price. So as customers are willing to pay less for the product than before, you may draw a surplus as this price begins to come downward. Demand shifts. So let's say this is the equilibrium, but price is slowly coming downward. As the market becomes saturated, you have fewer and fewer people that are willing to pay that price for that particular product. So then what happens? Well, what happens is that this demand here, or this demand line, shifts. So it actually shifts. Actually, I should have kept that line there, but let's just say it will shift. Demand will decrease. Let me keep that line here. So demand shifts. And then you end up having a new equilibrium here. Now notice the difference between the red and the yellow dot. This is the new point here. Let's keep it consistent, make that blue as well. This is the new equilibrium point, and let's call that PE prime. Is shift. But you as an entrepreneur, you're still here. Now, if you keep your prices at this point, but the equilibrium has moved downward here, you're going to end up having a what? If you don't shift your prices to meet the new equilibrium. What does this represent? What does this shaded area represent? You now have a new equilibrium here, PE prime, but your price of your products is still here. If you keep your prices here and the new equilibrium is below that, then what happens? Any guesses? So here's the old equilibrium. And this is the new one. So if you look at the this demand curve here, as I said, it has shifted. But if you keep your product here or your price here, you're going to have a difference in terms of your quantity demanded versus quantity supplied. So this is actually quantity supplied, and this is quantity demanded. So this is the new demand curve. So if you look at both of these, quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, right? This is 0. This is 0. This is infinity going all the way out. So if quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, what does that represent? What does that represent? Hello?
We here. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. What is that? Okay, it's a surplus, right? You got more supply than quantity demanded. That's because you decided that you were going to keep your price here at this level. Prices have decreased. Why? Because frankly, there's no demand for your product, and so people are not willing to pay the same price as they were paying before. So what happens? You as a business owner, you have to figure out what to do. You could lower your price, but then your margins, you won't make profit. And so the other thing to do is to perhaps find another market for your product. And you would find the market where you have this situation. Same demand, supply, price, quantity, or the origin. So in this country, you have an equilibrium here. But what does this situation represent in the middle? This shaded area, what does that represent in this country? And let's call this Brazil. So if this is quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, then what is this?
It's the opposite.
Okay, this would be quantity supplied is actually less. And you know that because you look at this is quantity, this intersects with the demand curve. So that's quantity demanded. And this is quantity supplied. So if quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, then this shaded area represents a shortage. This represents a surplus. So then it's logical for you to say, okay, I want to take my surplus and I want to move it to Brazil because they have a shortage. I have a surplus, and it's logical for me to go and find, overseas market. That would be the logical thing to do. But of course, you have these barriers, not physical barriers so much, but you have the tariffs, possibly. You have tariffs that you might have to pay, and you have also non-tariff barriers that are all listed in Chapter 8. And we know a tariff is a what? In a word, what's a tariff? Or duty.
A tax or something you got to pay.
So it's a tax. So that's a barrier, but if the Brazilian government wants these products to come in, then they will typically have they won't have a high tariff. That is, unless they're trying to protect their market. Sometimes when you have a shortage, you have a situation where you have a shortage. And this country actually has manufacturers locally, but cannot produce enough supply. So if there's a shortage in the market, then Brazil has to figure out where to get the balance from so that they can meet demand. And so then that is when you start entertaining imports. But even then, the Brazilian government may have these barriers, and some of these barriers are in the form of maybe a quota, which a quota is a limit to how many of these products that you can bring in. So you may have an idea that I want to move 10 million units over to Brazil, but they'll say you can only bring in 3 million. That's your limit. Or they may have another tax for you. They may say you can bring in your 10 million, but anything over 3 million, you pay another 2% tax. So 3 million, you're good, but anything over that, every million, you have to pay another, it probably won't be 2%. Well, let's just say you have to pay another 1% per million. So you have a limit of 3 million, but over that, you're taxed extra for every 1 million in terms of quantity. So that's another barrier. So you have all these barriers in between that you have to deal with. Some of the other barriers may be sanitation requirements. So you might have to undergo inspection. There might be things like local content requirements. Which means that if you're bringing this product in, this 3 million here, and you make these products in the United States, so they're made here in the US. If you want to bring products in, we will take 3 million, but the condition is when you make your products, you have to use Brazilian materials. So our farmers can ship you the supplies for your products. When you manufacture those, then you can ship them, you can send them here. And in fact, we might even waive that tax. So you have these kind of arrangements where companies or countries decide to trade one kind of benefit for the other. So if you patronize our farmers, if you get your materials from our farmers, make your products, and then you ship them here, we will eliminate the tax. But certainly you have all of these barriers in between, which also not only sanitation, local content requirements, you might have administrative delays. That's another barrier. Actually, in the book, they have one of the tables. If you look on page 253, it has China. It has tariff barriers for China. That's if you're going into China. Tariffs as high as 28% on foreign-made auto parts. If you're going into China, then you have a tariff of 28%. So what are the non-tariff barriers that they have here? So China, it says it's expensive, time-consuming procedures for obtaining pharmaceutical import licenses. So that's part of the administrative delays, getting a business license, maybe some other fees, maybe it takes a long time. Maybe you have, not only do you have sanitation requirements, you might have something like quality requirements. So in this case, the Brazilian government may say, okay, you can bring these 3 million units in, but you have to pass these inspections before we approve them. And if not, if you can't meet the standards, then you have to work until you can meet those standards. And some of these things might, especially if it's something like pharmaceuticals, or if it's something like agricultural products, you have for agricultural products, you might have a situation where they say it has to have less than 1% pesticide residue. It's probably, I'm just making this up, but let's say less than 1% pesticide residue. And then, of course, the fruit or the vegetables come in, and then they're tested by scientists, and then they determine whether or not that product can get in. And even in situations that are kind of moving toward organic. Now, a lot of times we hear organic meaning no pesticides are used at all, but that's not really the definition of organic. Organic farming, it has a certain limit to which they would allow pesticide residue. So it means that you can have some, but it can't supersede a limit in order for it to maintain this organic label. So you have some of these, a lot of these regulations that countries will impose to ensure that, obviously that their citizens are kept safe. What other kind of barriers do you have? You also have sometimes you have a kind of a nationalistic barrier. You have nationalism. And what that means is that sometimes you have products that come in as imports, but people feel more comfortable if something, let's say in this case, was made in Brazil. That has a better feeling for somebody who's Brazilian as opposed to made in the USA. So sometimes you have this nationalist backlash that's also a barrier. Sometimes it's a cultural barrier, but you have all these barriers that you have to control for. Some of the other duties they mention in here, ad valorem duties, which is a percentage of value. So this is 3 million units, but we don't know, let's say it's $1 a unit. So that would be, if it's $1 a unit, so if this is a dollar a unit, this would be equivalent to 3 million. So ad valorem means that if it's $3 million, then it's a percentage of the 3 million. So say if that's a 1% tax, then it's 1% of 3 million. So that's ad valorem. It's just a percentage of the value. Then you have other types of taxes that can be based on size, quantity, and weight. Let's say this is 3 million units, but it's also a ton. And anything over a ton, then they might give you a surcharge because it's over the limit. So you have these also in addition. And again, these are all barriers of trade that you have to consider prior to embarking on that relationship. So also in chapter 8, they talk about how you can get your products over to another market. So some of the ways you can get your products over to another market is, let's say we have a business here. This is the US. This is Brazil. And we want to actually establish a relationship here. Now, of course, we can export. We just went through that scenario. But there are lots of ways that you can export. Of course, you can have your export department here in the US. Let's say we're in Tallahassee. Well, we probably, let's just say Jacksonville, since Jacksonville has ports. And if we actually wanted to send goods from Tallahassee internationally, we probably have to use the Jacksonville ports to get our goods out. Or we can go to Miami. But of course, then you got to transport from Tallahassee to Miami and then Miami to wherever you're going. So we can go this route. And we also can use distributors in Brazil after we take orders, and then the distributor in Brazil, and let's say this is a company called, what do we call this company? Let's just call it XYZ. XYZ company is a distributor. So you can send these exports to XYZ, and then XYZ then sends them throughout the country. That's one way. Or you can have a branch of your company, and let's say your company is ABC, just keeping it simple. You can have a branch here. You take orders here in Jacksonville, or let's say in Tallahassee, and then ABC, which is your, let's say it's your sales office, can then get these products from you and then the ABC sales office would distribute these products. So this is more of a sales office or kind of a branch situation. In this situation here with the distributors, that's a separate company. They're not related to your company. They're just taking your products. They get a discount. They are actually trained on your product. They're trained to support your product and to support your product and then sell them, in their distribution channel. But let's say you don't have the knowledge as a company to deal with import-export. And we're ABC company. We have no idea of how to get these products over to Brazil. So there are lots of things that you can do. You can use export merchants. And what do merchants do? What do merchants do?
Don't they like buy and sell products?
Exactly. So let's say, for example, if we go with the inventory issue, let's say we have unsold inventory in our warehouse that's been sitting there for a year. And because the demand is low, or because people are not willing to pay the price that I want, I'm not selling as much, so I have this unsold inventory. What do I do with it? I don't know anything about import-export, and I don't have time to learn. And so you have these merchants that go around looking for unsold inventory. So they may come to you, and let's say this is $1 a unit. And you may post this unsold inventory on the market, and these merchants will then contact you and say, well, I want to bid on the inventory that you have, and I understand you want $1 a unit. I will offer you 45 cents a unit. And let's say you have 1 million units. So your inventory is worth $1 million in terms of if you found someone willing to buy it, consumers willing to buy it, you would get $1 million, but that's not happening. So you're trying to get rid of it. This merchant is offering you 45 cents a unit. So that is $450,000 that they're giving you in cash right now. Now you got this inventory is sitting in your warehouse and is not being sold. So $450,000 may look pretty good. And you may negotiate, go back and forth, and then finally come to an agreement of 65. After you negotiate back and forth, then you get $650,000. They get the inventory, this merchant does, and then this merchant then sells them wherever they can. So they might sell some to Brazil. They might sell some to, let's say, Malaysia. They may sell some to France. And this size is not indicative of the country, obviously. But they may sell them to different countries. They bought 1 million units. Maybe they sell 250,000 here. Maybe 250,000 here. Maybe this is 200,000 in Bahamas and 300,000 in Malaysia. And when they sell these products in these different markets, they obviously can charge different prices. So essentially, this export merchant could, in some markets, charge $1.50, they pay 65 cents for the unit. They might charge 150 in Brazil. Maybe over in Malaysia, it might be 75 cents. Maybe in France, it might be $1.25. Maybe in the Bahamas, it might be $1 even. And the business of an export merchant is basically to buy and to sell wherever they can. The drawback of this is these are your products and you don't know where they're going to end up. You don't have any intelligence on where those goods are going, whether the customer likes them or not like them. And you also, they're out of your control, and you have to obviously make sure that the export merchant isn't misrepresenting your brand once they begin selling these products. So that is one of those risks you take. There are other types of entities. There are export management companies. Again, if you don't have the knowledge to export your products, then you have companies that will do that for you. These companies are what are called intermediaries. And some of the things that they do is they may help in the other markets to help set prices, because you may not know whether to charge $1.25. Let's say if you do decide to go into that market, you don't know anything about the pricing. And so they will help you to, with that. They will also ensure that there's that your inventory is flow is stable. Basically, inventory management. They will manage your inventory for you. They can also act as distributor, and of course, also essentially a marketing rep. So this is a company that provides a lot of services. If you don't have an export department and you don't know how to go about the process of getting your products in another market, then you could hire a company and they will handle a lot of those activities for you. And then I mentioned a distributor. That's also mentioned in the book as well. Okay. I'm actually in my home office, so I got a lot of stuff around and just trying to access so many things in a small space, but just bear with me. So a few more things in chapter 8 before I go back to the drawing board is here we have tariffs and non-tariffs again, quotas, discriminatory procurement procedures in terms of supplier relationships, monetary policies, administrative and technical regulations. That is the graph I was talking about. The idea of time-consuming procedures for obtaining, in this case, pharmaceutical import licenses. Barriers that don't involve the taxes, but also involve other types of delays. That's the HTS we looked at, single column versus two column. Typically in normal trade relations means that you have some kind of breaks in terms of taxes. Maybe it's even a tax holiday where you don't have to pay any taxes. Here again, you have the additional that is if you don't have normal trade relations. If you have normal trade relations, you pay this percent. If you don't have normal trade relations, then you pay a much higher percent. It's kind of a source of protectionism. And for some entities, it's free. And so you have a lot of different levels of how these taxes are assessed. And of course, this is the trade referee, the GATT organization. It's actually the WTO, but they're still using the GATT here. These are things I mentioned. Ad valorem is a percentage of value of goods. Specific, which is weight, volume, length, or some other unit of measurement. And then a combination of the both of these. And these are some other concepts in terms of taxes. And these are some of the I guess you can say intermediaries that you can use. And when we talk about brokers basically match up buyers and sellers. So if you have excess inventory in your warehouse, you're looking for a buyer. You may hire a broker. That broker may go and use their network and find a buyer for your 1,000,000 units of inventory. And then they match you up, and then you all can go on and do your negotiation. And of course, export management company I just mentioned. And so all of these, you have various roles, and I won't go through all these for the sake of time. You also have a method of payment. And usually they have a diagram. They have a diagram in here that shows you how the flow works. And if you bear with me, I might be able to find one. Just bear with me. They actually should have a diagram on that because that's pretty important. Now, this is just, I just Googled this, and just to give you an idea of how this flow works on this side, I'm actually going to click on it. Hopefully, I can get a larger, representation of it. Okay, so this is a letter of credit process. You have the buyer and the seller, they get together and they sign a contract. So they're importing, they're exporting. You have a contract, but of course you have to arrange for the payment. You have two banks. You have the importer's bank and you have the exporter's bank. So the buyer has to go to its bank and it has to apply for a letter of credit. That is essentially the bank telling the exporter's bank that this guy has the money. This guy has the money to pay for the goods that are coming in. So that letter of credit is sent to the bank, and then the seller's bank then informs the seller that I have a letter of credit that's been issued by this company. Do you know who this company is? And you say yes. And we just in the midst of negotiating a contract, and yeah, they're legitimate. And so then that letter of credit is given to the exporter, and then they deliver the goods. And of course, in the midst, there's document being exchanged between the banks, and then you have to arrange for the delivering of the goods and all the other documents that go with it. And so all of this is done now electronically. It's a very trivial process. You don't have to wait weeks for documents to be delivered. This is all done electronically. But this is a flow of the document exchange, and of course the goods, is that's a whole different matter, because you have to decide how they're sent, whether it's going to be through seagoing vessel, air freight, and what have you. That's also in the contract, but that's kind of a different matter. And also, who pays? You all probably have had that in accounting. All right. So what I'll do now is begin to talk about market entry strategies. I only have a few minutes because I do want you all to us to get this group project on the way. And so what I'll do now is, as quick as I can, try to draw some of the entry strategies. Now, of course, we already know about import-export. We've been talking about that. And let's say that we are country A. This is country B. We are ABC. And of course, we know ABC, as ABC company, we can get our products by exporting into country B. And of course, we have to deal with the barriers as well. So that's one way. Now, let's say we don't want to do that. We don't want to go through all the taxes and tariffs that we just talked about, and we want to somehow circumvent that extra expense. And let's say we do set up a branch here. So we have an extension of ABC company, such that if ABC company is selling products, then ABC headquarters would send those products to the branch. So you don't need a distributor or any of those intermediaries. You can just use your own branch to get into that market. So this is a branch situation. Same company, same logo, same corporate procedures and everything else. Now, there's another way. You can go through and set up a subsidiary. And let's say that is XYZ Corporation. Now, this subsidiary may be a company that is set up by you, but it's a separate entity. It's a brand new company that's specifically for that market. So you can have a wholly owned subsidiary where it's you have 100% ownership. Or let's say if this is a foreign entity and you want to buy just a majority stake, you only want to buy 51%. And in effect, you have a controlling share of that business. And because you have a controlling share, you now can get your products to XYZ, and XYZ can then use their supply chain to get the products into this country. Let's just say that's Brazil again. So you're actually going through a subsidiary, and in this case, you have a majority ownership. And so you can get your ABC products and use XYZ's supply chain. What's the benefit of this? What is the benefit of using a subsidiary, or let's say buying 51% of a Brazilian company? If this is a Brazilian company originally, and you buy 51% of that, it effectively becomes your company. But why would I do that? What's the benefit of me buying 51% of XYZ? Of course, I can get my products in, but what are the other benefits?
You said 51%?
Yeah. So ABC, we actually own XYZ now. We're a majority owner. But what's the benefit of that? We obviously expand our supply chain, right? That's one benefit. What are some of the other benefits?
Wouldn't the company be more yours because you have 51% over it?
Yeah, it's more yours, but why is that a great benefit? Besides the fact that we have now access to their supply chain, what are some of the other benefits? Well, one of the things is you do sidestep tariffs that you were paying before, because even if you have ABC, you have a branch, and these goods are coming in, you're still going to be taxed. But with XYZ, and let's say this is a partly owned Brazilian company, there might be some stipulations where if there are taxes assessed, maybe you get a break, or maybe you can have a manufacturing plant here. So let's say this company includes a plant. You make your products here at the ABC plant, and then those products are then shipped to XYZ company to be distributed. So you sidestep the tariffs, but you also have an entity here, XYZ, that knows the lay of the land. They know the political environment, they know the economic, they know the cultural environment, technological, financial, legal. So you have a partner here that really knows the lay of the land, as opposed to in this situation here, I'm a branch, I might not know as much about Brazil, and I might be just, I won't say flying by the seat of my pants, but I don't know as much as, say, this company XYZ that I decided I wanted to buy because it gives me more access into this market. So this gives you more access to the market, plus you understand that this entity will be able to help you understand these variables or these factors. You have another option. Let's say this is ABC. This is country B for Brazil again, XYZ. And let's say I really don't want to buy 51%, but I meet with the executives of XYZ Corporation and I establish a joint venture, which means that, let's say it's 45-55. It can be 50-50, or it can even be 30-70. But it's a joint venture. It's a separate company. So that company can be called ABC XYZ as a separate entity. And it's, of course, both owned by both entities. And you have different branding, you have different, obviously different trademarks, different logos and all of that, but it's a jointly owned company. So that's another option. We had the idea of a buyout before, where you buy either 51 to 100%. 100% means it's wholly owned, and you own it in total. So you can have a buyout, you can have a joint venture, you can also have things like a strategic alliance. This is not permanent. This might be a situation where ABC and XYZ will say, okay, we're trying to accomplish a goal to create technology standards. And so they collaborate on a research project. So they both come together, put their resources, and then they come up with a set of standards. And then after those standards are then decided upon, industry standards decided upon, then they go about their separate ways. So that's a strategic alliance. Or it could be even producing, putting resources together to establish some kind of factory. It can even be tangible. It can be tangible or intangible. So lots of different ways to get into a market. Also, the licensing arrangements, which is, we know, franchising being a main mode of licensing. You have also manufacturing contracts, and we know that as outsourcing. And what outsourcing does is it may even give you access to, let's say this is a factory, it may even give you access to the market where those goods are being produced. So then after these goods are produced, then they're shipped in the country where they're being produced. In some other instances, the products are made here, assembled, and then just shipped back without being sold in that market where they're being manufactured. So you have a lot of different ways that you can work these trade arrangements.